The vaults in Fallout 4 are no strangers to horrific experiments, cruelty, and acts of inhumanity, and in this guide I am going to go through in detail all the vaults in Fallout 4 and their hidden experiments within. Hi, I'm Mo and I'm trapped in Fallout. We will begin with Vault 111, which is the first vault that you will find yourself in, and you basically find yourself inside this vault as part of the main quest. As you're enjoying an evening with your spouse and child, you find that the beginnings of the war have just begun, and as a result you are quite literally running for the vault entrance. When you eventually do make it to the vault entrance, you find yourself surrounded by other residents, some of which you assume are from Sanctuary, and quite possibly some of them are actually from the nearby city of Concord. And the moment the bombs hit, right over there, that is when you actually emerge or rather descend into the vault, just barely escaping the nuclear nuke. When you do eventually make it inside the vault itself, you are basically asked to follow a Vault-Tec doctor who will take you to a pod, and when you get to the pod, the doctor tells you that the pod is actually designed to remove any harmful effects that you may have carried into the vault. So as you follow the doctor, you are then instructed to basically enter the pod for some removal of any harmful effects on you. After witnessing your spouse being taken out and your son Sean being taken away from you, you make your way outside of the vault following a very linear path, and as you do that, eventually you will come across a security terminal, and it is in this terminal that you get to read your first few log entries, trying to figure out what actually happened. In it, you will find the Vault-Tec security instructions, which when you read, you find that the purpose of the vault was to see the long-term effects of freezing unsuspecting residents and then to see what happens to them over time. Reading through the remaining entries in the terminal, you will find the log entry under Operations Protocol Manual and then the all clear evacuations. And in it you will find a mandatory shelter period, and in that you will find that this experiment was supposed to be for 180 days, and after that the staff of the vault would be notified and asked to open the vault doors. However, in the same terminal, if you read the security logs and then read the last entry, you will find that no such clear ever came from Vault-Tec. As you then make your way through the vault, you will encounter your very first living creature, a giant radroach that seems odd to you. This somewhat shows evident that the vault door may have been opened or something did in fact happen, causing this giant radroach to appear within the vicinity of the vault. Further to that, as you then make your way through this what seems to be a power room, you also encounter more giant radroaches, but more worryingly, you encounter a fallen skeleton wearing the same uniform that you were wearing. If you then progress further to that, eventually you will find yourself in what seems to be a large office, or most probably the Overseer's office. From here, you then have access to the Overseer's terminal. From here, if you observe the Overseer's logs, you will find that there are a number of log entries in here. In particular, you want to pay attention to the supplies running low and the mutiny log entries. In the supplies running low log entry, you read about the Overseer's thoughts on what was happening regarding the supplies, and you find out that the all clear did not come after 180 days, and you also learn about the reluctance to open the vault door given the radiation effects outside. More worryingly, when you then read the logs on the mutiny, you find that a faction formed inside Vault 111, and this faction tried to get their hands on the supplies and open the vault door. We don't really know what happened after that. Not much is really known what actually happened between the faction that formed inside Vault 111, the Overseer, and the security staff, but chances are that when the all clear did not come after the 180 days and there was tension between this faction, the security staff, and the Vault Overseer, chances are that the faction probably did manage to take over control of the vault, and chances are they probably made it out. Although looking at the skeletons across the vault, there probably is some evidence that not everyone actually made it out. In short, Vault 111 was an experiment to see the effects of long-term cryostasis on human body. It wasn't a haven to protect residents from the fallout, although that is a pattern with almost all vaults, i.e. almost every vault will promise something, but the reality is something entirely different. And we'll find that out when we now start to look at other vaults that you find in Fallout 4. We will now visit Vault 114, which is located under Park Street Station. The station itself is just directly west of Goodneighbor and directly east of Swans Pond. Once you make it to the station, just enter the station. Once inside the station, just follow the linear path until you get to the tunnels. And when you get to the tunnels, again, just head north and eventually you will find the entrance to the vault. And once you find the entrance to Vault 114, you will be able to use your Pip-Boy to simply open the vault door. As soon as you enter Vault 114, you will find that you have immediate access to what appears to be a security room to the right over here. If you enter this security room, right inside you will find a terminal which you also will have access to. So when looking at the terminals in here, you will find some interesting log. In the terminal, you will find a log titled Science Staff Only, and when reading it, you will find that Vault 114 was advertised as a place for high-ranking members for the local and state government, local business people and their families. However, the luxury element of the vault was incorrectly advertised, and Vault 114 was actually a social experiment to see what would happen when you take people from a high-class background and put them into cramped spaces. On top of this, family would be randomly placed in shared accommodation, bathroom spaces were also shared, and supplies were rather minimal. Further to this, they were also looking to recruit an overseer who would have the highest of authority over everyone, but more on this in a moment. As you then make your way through the vault, you find that the vault has actually been repopulated with the Triggerman. Given that it's been abandoned, it's been repurposed as a base for the Triggerman and their boss, Skinny Malone. As you make your way deeper into the vault, you will bump into Nick Valentine, a larger-than-life NPC who was a synth in a previous life. It seems that he was captured by the Triggerman and then kept captive in the Overseer's office. When you rescue Nick Valentine, he will tell you a little bit about himself and you will have the option to speak to him as well, but we are rather more interested in the contents of the Overseer's desk right over here. After rescuing Nick, you can listen to the holotapes on the Overseer's desk, and the one that we are particularly interested in is this holotape over here, number 87. When playing this tape, you will listen to an interview that Vault-Tec were doing with someone called Soup Can Harry. When listening to the interview, you hear just how mad and deranged Harry was, and furthermore, you find that he would have been hired as the Overseer. Here are just some small extracts, just to give you an idea of the sort of person Harry was.
The candidate has refused to give his real name and has only provided the name the Soup Can Harry.
That's right. I ain't telling you nothing. My name is the name I call myself, not the rank and number the government brands on me. No, sir. I've seen what they do. Gum up the works with red tape and bureaucracy, take every hard-earned cent and use it to fund their Illuminati, Freemasons party. I'm a free man. I should be able to live as I see fit. My taxes pay for them streets and alleys and dumpsters. I'll sleep where I want.
Sir, you may just be the perfect candidate. How would you like to be the new overseer for Vault 114?
I ain't wearing no goddamn tie or pants.
As you then make your way out of the vault with Nick, you get to experience firsthand what the designated showers and bathrooms were like, and you get an idea of just how cramped these spaces were. So right over here, you can see there's virtually no privacy. And if we go to the laboratory and have a look there, you can see again just what these conditions would have been like for someone that would have considered themselves to be of a high class society. You also observe the same settings when observing their bedrooms and living accommodations. Again, there weren't any spacious room for these high elite people. They were all going to be cramped into one single spaces. When you find your way to the nursery and enter it, you find that the nursery was also potentially going to be cramped. Chances are that the children would have been kept away from their parents and older siblings. So, this is again just another bit of evidence to prove that there was a great deal of isolation between parents, their children, and how they would have been expected to live in such conditions. Thankfully, it looks like the vault was actually never finished, given the state of things that are. So, chances are any further experiments that would have taken place in the vault perhaps never happened. In short, the experiment for Vault 114 was basically designed to see what would happen when you take high class society members and put them into cramped spaces, effectively dividing them and taking them away from their children, and instead of giving them luxurious spaces, cramping them into some rather undesired conditions such as the ones we've seen for the bedrooms and the laboratories. We will now visit Vault 75, which is located under the Malden Middle School. The school itself is located directly far north of Park Street Station, the last vault that we visited. To gain access to the vault, you will need to enter the basement of the school, which you can access through this pathway and then simply go into the basement through these doors. As you enter the basement and make your way towards the entrance of the vault, you see a large symbol of the gunners, pretty much making it evident that this particular vault has been repurposed as a base for the gunners. As soon as you enter Vault 75, to your left you see what appears to be a security or admission office of sorts, and inside it you will find a terminal. When you access this admissions terminal, on it you will find a log entry titled Press Release. When reading this log entry, this states that the vault was advertised as a quick escape plan directly under the Malden Middle School for the children and their families in the event if war ever broke out. When we then read the log entry titled Enrollment Guidelines, we see that special considerations were made for anyone who had children under the age of 15 or attended public school or had up to 2 adults per children. When reading the special assignment log entry, you find that any children under the age of 17 were directly taken to the overseer, while all adults were taken to another part of the vault by the head of security. And when reading the log entry titled Admissions Records, you find that the youngest of all children admitted were as young as 6, while the oldest were around 13 years old. Suffice to say that all children were most likely very young when they entered the vault. As you then explore the vault, eventually you will find a classroom, and inside this classroom at the very back under dimmed lights you will find a terminal called Classroom Terminal. When you access this terminal, you will find a number of log entries. The one we are interested in is this called Up Top Land Heroes. This appears to be a story of how the world outside the vault is bad and evil and has bad monsters, and any child living inside Vault 75 was to grow up to become strong and then help the people of the up top land. As you explore Vault 75, you will find that there are some areas of the vault that you do not have access to, and to gain access to these 2 areas, you will need to acquire 2 access cards. The first is this lab access card that can be found in this combat training area, and we'll talk about this area in a moment. When you make it to this area, just go up this set of stairs, and over here you will find a tool case. If you open this tool case, you should find the Vault 75 lab access card inside. When you get the lab access card, you will need to make your way to the security wing and use the card to gain access to the security wing. Once you've done that, you will need to head north, and you will need to then go up these stairs, and then you will need to head roughly west all the way to the very end until you see a gunner conscript who will be holding the admin access card. So as you get to the end, you should find a gunner conscript. You will need to take them out, and once you've taken them out, on them you will find the admin access card. After you have gained the admin access card, you can head back down the same way and then gain access to the overseer's wing. When you do that, head up the stairs, and eventually you will gain access to the overseer's office. And within this office, you will find access to the overseer's terminal, which is where we will find some further interesting logs right over here. The first log entry is for the operations protocol manual, and this will contain the full manual for the vault. When you open this log, you will find that it is broken down into several different logs: the resident admittance, family policy, staff duties, etc. When you read the resident admittance log entry, you will find that anyone over the age of 70, i.e. adults, were to be taken away by the head of security and immediately disposed of, while the children were taken to the atrium area to meet the overseer, where their training would begin from 2 weeks of entering the vault. When reading the entry for the overseer's directive, you find that anyone over the age of 18 were to be removed. This means that as the children grew older, they would eventually be disposed of just as their parents were. You also read that any child showing promising traits had their genes harvested. Any child of an average genetic makeup but had high intelligence were to be recruited by the research staff. And when you read the annual turnover protocol log entry, you find that as a child reached the age of 18, they graduated and were removed from all other children. At that point, if the child was labeled as excellent, they would be taken to the laboratory for processing, and any child that was superior would be recruited to positions inside the vault, and any other child that was not excellent or superior would be disposed. We are not sure what processing here actually means for any child that was marked as excellent. When reading the overseer's logs, and in particular reading the nursery capacity issues, you find that they had basically no spots left within the nursery, suggesting that the experiments were in full force and they had plenty of quote-unquote test subjects to carry out their experiments. If we now go back to the training area, all of this now takes on slightly different meaning. This area was most likely used to train the children to judge their, let's just say, physical abilities. If you then go further away from the training area, you also find rooms for what appears to be some radiation contamination room, as well as physical rooms for what seems like physical test. There also appears to be a medical room right over here as well, suggesting the sort of experiments, or let's just say harvesting, that might have happened to these poor children. In short, Vault 75 was used to experiment on these poor children. From a young age, they were brainwashed to think that the outside world was bad, and whilst they underwent their physical and mental activities, over time they were harvested and either disposed of or recruited directly as research staff in the vault. Sadly, we don't really know what happened to any child that was disposed of, or what eventually happened, or what really led to the downfall of the vault. But suffice to say, this is probably one of the more horrific experiments across all the vaults in Fallout. And if you made it this far into the video, then please do consider liking this video. I really like enjoying reading and replying to as many comments as I can, so tell me what you think about the vaults in Fallout 4. What vault do you think is the most horrific vault? I personally think Vault 75 certainly ranks right up there on the top. Next, we are going to visit Vault 81, that is directly west of Diamond City. When you make it to the entrance of the vault, just go inside. When entering the vault, you will immediately find that you have the ear of the overseer, and you will find that the vault is actually actively populated with the thriving vault community. They have a working cafeteria, a working hydroponics for their crops and vegetables, a classroom and teacher for their students, and plenty of living accommodation for their families. They also have a working clinic with doctors, and when you visit the clinic for the first time, you will be asked by Dr. Forsyth to donate some blood, which I suggest you do to figure out what actually happened in the vault. After donating your blood, you will find that one of the cats has actually escaped from the vault. It is the same cat you see when you enter the vault. So we will need to go and find the cat again to try and figure out what actually happened inside this vault, given that the vault currently seems to be actively populated and thriving. The cat can be found in this location right over here, which is directly east to Vault 81. You need to find what appears to be a small lake, and on the dock of the lake is the cat. Speak to the cat, and once you've done that, ashes will make their way back into the vault, and you also will need to make your way back into the vault. Particularly, you will need to go and visit the clinic. When you make it back into the clinic inside Vault 81, you will find that one of the young child called Austin has caught a mysterious disease. In the clinic, you will hear a conversation between the two doctors and Bobby about a hidden door to a section of the vault that has been otherwise a secret to everyone inside the vault, including the overseer. You also hear Bobby say that he gained access to a terminal inside this hidden entrance where he found log entries that go to describe how the hidden part of the vault has mole rats and that it has been used to spread diseases and cures. After the conversation has ended, you will follow Bobby and he will show you access, or he will show you how to gain access to the hidden section of Vault 81. When you do gain access into the hidden section of Vault 81, you find that it is basically in ruins. It looks like it's been destroyed from the inside out. As you gain access to your first terminal, which appears to be inside the living quarters of what seems to be a researcher or a scientist, you will find some interesting log entries on the terminal, one for breeding program and another for serum production. The breeding program update goes into detail about the aggressiveness of the mole rats which have been experimented on, while the serum production log shows promising results of the serum that were able to treat 36% of all known diseases. As you make your way through the vault, you will find yourself in an observation area that has a hydroponics terminal which has a single log entry. When reading that log entry, you find that the vault dwellers who were not part of the secret vault had no idea that there was a secret vault, or rather, in other words, they were under observation from the staff inside the secret half of the vault. It also goes on to say that the greenhouse in the non-secret half of the vault would be a perfect place to introduce viruses into the population as well as any potential cures. This proves that the staff in the secret half of the vault were certainly planning to run experiments on the population on the non-secret half of the Vault 81. Furthermore, when going through the research wing of the secret vault section, you will come across another terminal again with a single log entry. This log entry goes on to describe how a room in the non-secret half of the vault was repurposed to be a social environment, and that the staff in the secret half of the vault could use this social room to further expose the residents of the non-secret half of the vault to more viruses. As you travel further into the vault, you will find another research com terminal, and this also has some particular log entries on it. After getting access to this terminal and looking through the multiple log entries, the last one in particular reveals that one of the researchers inside the secret half of Vault 81 sabotaged the entire plan for Vault-Tec to carry out the experiments on the unsuspecting foes of Vault 81. As a result, the staff in the hidden part of the vault were not able to carry out their experiments and were also effectively locked in, doomed to be trapped inside the hidden part of the vault forever. Thanks to this doctor, the experiments were not ultimately carried out on the vault dwellers inside the non-secret half of Vault 81, and they were instead carried out on the mole rats found within the vault instead. Now, before leaving this area, make sure to grab this Vault-Tec password, and from here, if you now make your way all the way to the back, you will find another terminal right over here where you can use that password to open the door just immediately to the right of it. And as you do that and open this door and go up the stairs, you will eventually bump into Curie. After talking to Curie and gaining access to her quarters, you will also find another terminal inside her office, and if you gain access to it, you will find a single mission statement. This goes on to describe how Vault 81 was going to be an experiment to wipe out all diseases known to the human race. It also goes on to say how the vault was equipped with the state-of-art technology, a century's worth of supplies, genetically adapted mole rats, and a vault full of human test subjects. It also goes on to describe how the unsuspecting vault dwellers of Vault 81 would be used as test subjects. The staff were also asked to ensure that the vault dwellers did not simply die out and were given ample opportunities to maintain a steady test population by breeding. And it also further goes on to say that each generation of research staff would transfer their knowledge from generation to generation while allowing Curie to be the sum total of all of that knowledge. After meeting Curie, she also gives you the cure to treat Austin of his disease, which you can then go and give to Dr. Forsyth, which he can use to cure Austin. In short, the purpose of Vault 81 was to experiment on unsuspecting vault dwellers across a span of years, exposing them to diseases and cures in pursuit of finding a cure for all known diseases for the human race. Next, we are going to travel to Vault 95, which is far south of Vault 81, all the way across the river, right next to the edge of the glowing sea. So just south of the edge of the glowing sea, we will find the location and entrance to Vault 95. As you approach the entrance of Vault 95, you find that it is heavily guarded with gunners and gunner privers, as well as assaultrons. On the surface, this vault is yet another vault that has been converted into a gunner's base. As you enter the vault itself, you find even more gunners, including a Mr. Handy, acting as further reinforcements to guard the entrance of the vault. As you make your way deeper into the vault, you find skeletal remains of what appears to be the previous vault dwellers. You're still not entirely sure what happened, but if you make your way to the reactor room, you find a number of these vault dwellers, all skeleton, showing that they perhaps weren't recently deceased, but have been out for a particularly very long time. But at this point, we still don't know what actually happened to them. When you make your way into the overseer's office, again you see a very similar scenario. You see a number of these vault dwellers, some still sitting in their chairs. Again, no idea what's actually happened to them. But whilst we have made our way into the overseer's office, this will give us a good opportunity to actually access the overseer's terminal. On the overseer's terminal, you will find 2 log entries and the ability to unlock the facility's wing. When reading the Vault 95 Overseer's Manifest, you realize that Vault 95 was created to help chem addicts recover from their addictions. For the Overseer particularly, they were put in a very supportive and just position. There was no malice here at all with the Overseer. They were genuinely put there to help the Vault Dwellers. No experiments, no hidden agendas. You can also unlock the facility's wing using the Overseer's terminal. As you then enter the residential area of the vault, make a right turn. So take the second right, and from here take another right, and then take a left, and you will enter what appears to be a former resident's dwelling, and in here you will have access to their private terminal. When reading the first log, you gather that things were going very well in the vault for the first 5 years. The vault was doing very well, and most of the vault dwellers who were suffering from the withdrawal effects of Chem were for the most part doing well. In fact, for those who were suffering, were doing very well and bonded like a family. But the moment you read the second log entry, you see that some Chem addicts somehow gained access to a number of chems. The second log entry goes on to say that a number of vault dwellers immediately cracked under, and the author of the log entry hid, hearing gunshots echoing inside the vault. The third and fourth log entries don't offer much hope either, sadly. It shows how the author of the log entries tried their best to stay strong, tried not to give in, but in the end the addiction was simply too strong. they felt they had no choice but to do what they felt was right. If you go back to the residential area, and this time instead of taking the right, if you take a left, you will find another terminal, this time locked with a novice lock. When you gain access to this terminal, you will find two log entries, one titled Your Orders and the other one Observation Journal. When reading the Your Orders entry, you find this particular vault dweller was placed here by Vault-Tec and was asked to at all length take part in the activities ordered by the overseer. They were also to observe the behavior of all vault dwellers who were suffering from chem addiction, and after a span of 5 years, they were to open a hidden stash of chems and let the vault dwellers find them on their own. In short, this vault dweller was pretending to be a chem addict and was instructed to reintroduce chems to every vault dwellers after 5 years. When reading the personal log of this particular Vault-Tec dweller, you discover they only had one entry, and reading it reveals that they saw every vault dweller doing very well by following the programs set out by the overseer. They also go on to say that after the 5th calendar year had passed, they took out the hidden stash whilst all the vault dwellers were sleeping, waiting to see what the effect would be when the chem stash was discovered in the morning. Going by the log entries that we read earlier in the other terminal in the other vault dwellers' living quarters, I guess we know what probably happened. In short, Vault 95 was an experiment to see what happens when chem is taken away from someone who suffers from chem addiction for a fixed period of 5 years, what the effects are and how that can be managed. It was then to see what would happen if chem was reintroduced to the same individuals and for that to be documented. This was a rather cruel experiment at the cost of a number of vulnerable vault dwellers who for the most part were actually doing very well until the chems were reintroduced. Next, we are going to visit Vault 118, which is found in the Far Harbor DLC, specifically located under Cliff's Edge Hotel. The hotel itself is directly west of Far Harbor. Cliff's Edge Hotel is like a maze itself, and finding the entrance to Vault 118 is rather difficult. As you travel through the hotel itself, you will find that it is populated with feral ghouls, making it a rather dangerous place to be. You will also notice that the hotel itself looks very rich. This seemed to be a place specifically designed to cater for the upper class society. When you eventually do find the entrance to Vault 118, after pulling the switch to the vault door, you are greeted by Maxwell and you are asked if you are the detective they sent for. Answering with a yes then follows with Maxwell opening the door for you. When entering the vault, you are greeted again by Maxwell and you have the option to ask him what happened. When doing so, Maxwell says that Mr. Parker, the financier of the hotel, has been murdered. You can then follow Maxwell to the crime scene. When you arrive at the crime scene, you will see two robo-brains talking to each other about what has happened and basically start arguing with each other. And it is then at this point that Maxwell instructs both robo-brains to go into their own quarters and wait for the sole survivor to investigate the crime scene and wait for the sole survivor to come asking questions later. From the atrium, if you head north and enter the residential area of Vault 118, you will bump into Gilda and Keith inside what seems to be a recording room of sorts. When talking to Gilda and choosing the flirting options, you find that she thinks she was an actor at one point in her life, acting on the big stage or silver screen. If you continue to flirt with her and pass every flirting option, you both will eventually go out on a date, and let's just say nature takes its course. Once the deed with Gilda is done, you can talk to her again, and at this point you can ask her some questions, and in particular her thoughts on the case. And it is at this point she reveals that Santiago has been rather obsessed with the murder, pointing you in a direction of travel to pursue. If you now go back and talk to Keith about his thoughts in the case, he basically says the same thing. He says that Santiago was obsessed with the murder. Whilst we are still inside the residential area, you can go into this place here and you can pick up this key here, the overseer's key, and we will need this a little bit later on. For the moment, let's pursue this murder investigation. If you go back into the atrium and now look for clues in the murder victim's area, you will be able to inspect the brain enclosure as well as examining the blood that's on the floor. If you then speak to Maxwell about this and ask him about the robot residents, Maxwell reveals to you that the robo-brains were actually human residents before the war, and the best way for the residents to prolong their life was to transfer their brains into robo-brains. This now makes sense why Gelda thinks she was an actress. This is in fact because she was an actress before she had her brain transferred into the robo-brain chassis. You can now also ask about the murder victim to learn their name, which was Ezra Parker, and also learn that it was their idea to build the vault in the first place. From the atrium, if you now head southwest instead, you will bump into Santiago, who should be found in this room over here. When speaking to Santiago, he will take you on a small tour showing you his art collection and asking you to tell him what you think about it. After the tour is complete, you can ask Santiago some further questions. Asking him questions about the case and doing so reveals that Juliana Riggs had an argument with Ezra, the victim. If you poke further, you will find that Santiago has no idea what they were arguing about, but Gelda may have overheard the argument. After relocating Gelda and asking her about the argument that Juliana and Ezra were having, she reveals that it was something to do with the overseer's office. Now, given that we had the key to the overseer's office, we can now use it and we can now enter the overseer's office. When entering the office, you will find a single vault dweller, the first one we've seen so far in the overseer's office, most likely to be the overseer themselves, but more importantly, you will also see their terminal. When looking at the terminal, you will see a number of logs and we will look through them in a moment. You also find the option to play a tape. Playing the tape reveals that Ezra was basically stealing funding from their investors, the same investors that were helping to build the vault. After learning about the funding issue, if you make your way into the room opposite where you spoke to Santiago, inside you will find two robo-brains. You will find Bert, who is the husband of Juliana Riggs. When speaking to Juliana, you will have the option to confront her about her fight with Ezra. Next, if you then speak to Bert, her husband, you will be able to ask him about how Juliana has been acting so strangely. He also draws it to the same issue, something about the overseer's office. In fact, when speaking to Bert and asking him specifically about Juliana, he is also under the impression that Juliana is acting strangely, different to how she usually acts. Now we can return to the atrium and we will follow the blood trail. And as we do that, you will see the particular murder weapon was right here all along. So if you follow the blood trail, you'll be able to find the fence buster, which is a unique weapon that ignores 30% of the target's resistance and energy defenses. Now we can go and speak to Maxwell about our current findings. You can tell him that you found the murder weapon. From here, we can now go and speak to Keith, given that there is an assumption that the murder weapon belonged to Keith. You can accuse Keith of the murder, but when you do that, Keith gives you a pretty strong alibi. He tells you that he was in fact in love with Ezra. If you were to believe him, rules him out from being the murder suspect for Ezra. Given that, that really only leaves us with Juliana. So let's go back to Juliana and speak to her about what we found so far. So when speaking to Juliana, we can accuse her of the murder, and when you ask Ezra about the embezzlement, you find a rather interesting twist. You find that Juliana is in fact Ezra and has been Ezra this entire time. What actually happened was that Ezra confronted Juliana, given Juliana found out about Ezra's embezzlement. So what he did was he basically took out Juliana and then he disguised himself to be Juliana and framed the dead victim as Ezra. In the atrium, it is in fact Juliana that has been taken out by Ezra. Now that we know a little bit more about what has actually happened here, let's go back into the Overseer's terminal and examine the logs to try and figure out what actually was the history behind Vault 118. When looking through the protocol manual and reading the preferential treatment, you find that there were two test groups. Test Group A, which consisted of a maximum of 10 ultra-rich individuals, and Test Group B, which consisted of around 300 individuals. Members from Test Group A would have pretty much anything they wanted whenever they wanted and were considered to be above the law, while Test Group B were confined to cramped living conditions, had limited supplies, and if they broke any vault rules, their punishments would be decided by Test Group A. The punishments themselves would be carried out by the robotic staff, which were entirely under the control of Test Group A. When looking through the Overseer's log, you find that there were only 3 log entries. The first, titled Change of Testing Parameters, goes into detail about how one of the members of Test Group A was a researcher from General Atomic and was running an advanced robotics program. The log entry goes into detail explaining how this researcher was suggesting other members of Test Group A to transfer their brains into the RoboBrain chassis. This basically backs up our earlier conversation with Maxwell, where he mentioned the same thing. The second log entry then goes on to say that one of the members of Test Group A had overwritten the door locks, stopping the locals from getting into the vault. In fact, the Overseer themselves also seem to have been locked out into their own office. The third and final log entry from the Overseer then confirms that none of the 300 predicted locals were even able to make it into the vault, and that the only human remaining in the vault was the Overseer themselves, while all other remaining vault dwellers were the 10 members from Test Group A. I suppose this confirms why we did not see any skeletons inside Vault 118, and perhaps why we saw so many ghouls in the hotel when we were searching for the entrance to the vault. In short, Vault 118 was supposed to be a social experiment to see what happened when a group of 10 ultra-rich people had total dominance over a local population of 300 working-class people. But what actually happened was that the 10 ultra-rich locked the vault door, stopping from anyone entering the vault. Even the Overseer was not able to open the vault door. As a result, the vault was entirely populated by the 10 ultra-rich and the Overseer. The Overseer also appeared to have been locked into their own office. Over time, the 10 ultra-rich wanted to outlast the war, so they had their brains transferred into the chassis of the robo-brains that we see right now. Finally, we don't really know what happened to the 300 locals that were supposed to enter the vault since they were all locked out. I guess we could say they met their ends rather quickly outside instead of being subjected to torments of the 10 ultra-rich members inside. However, as we make our way back out of the vault and through the hotels, we can't help but think that some of the feral ghouls we see are part of the 300 original. I guess in a manner of speaking, by being transformed into these ghouls, they too achieved immortality, but in the process probably lost their humanity. Thank you so much for making it this far into the guide, and if you enjoyed it, then please make sure to press the like button, as that really helps the channel out, and leave a comment in the comment section of this video sharing your thoughts on the video. And given that you have made it this far, click on the video you see on the screen right now, as I think you will enjoy watching this one too. Hi, I'm Mo, and I'm still trapped in Fallout.